And we're getting ready to move into our panel discussion at this time about the modern family in Belize. And interestingly enough, we have an all-male panel joining us today. We have with us Dylan Williams, who's the Monitoring and Evaluation Officer for the National Committee for Families and Children. We have Fermin Olivera, who is a social work lecturer at the University of Belize. And we have John Flowers, who is a consultant within the social sector as well. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
All right, family men. You mean if you have this conversation, it means you guys are setting the example, right?
Definitely. Good examples.
Yes.
Ideally.
Yes.
You have bad examples too, right?
Okay, well, I think this is also a very interesting conversation to have, and we were joking during the break that there are many misconceptions about the population and their status within the country. So let's just start off by painting the picture as to what families look like within Belize. And my first question is looking at demographics, male and female, and how many of them are within some sort of unions.
Well, maybe from a quantitative point of view, and then maybe Fermin, you could jump in with some qualitative elements. But from the most recent census, which is about 7 years ago, 2010, we were looking roughly at around 80,000 or so households in Belize. Unfortunately, Marlene, we don't capture statistics by families, if I could put it that way. Unfortunately, we have rainfall almost by the hour for certain stations, but we don't know much about our families. So that tells you a little bit about where our priorities are. But in terms of those 80,000 or so households, you find that about maybe 1 in 5, 1 in 4 are female-headed. You find that about half of them roughly are living in urban and the other half in rural. Actually, rural is a little bit more than the urban population. And then in terms of women and men, you have almost an even split between males and females in our population. Within certain 5-year age cohorts, as you look at the population age structure, you might find males in some cases outnumbering in maybe around 105 males to 100 females roughly. But generally you have a few females in the more in the what you would call the reproductive age grouping, where females tend to outnumber males because females tend to live longer, men are dying younger for different reasons. And so you find that in those age grouping, you find that the women are outnumbering the men to a certain extent. But overall, it's almost an even split, men to women. Unlike what we were discussing during the break, no?
I can't believe we still have people in the country saying that the population is 3 women to 1 man. But as I pointed out, I think those are for different reasons that they like that lie. But Belize is currently almost 50-50.
50-50.
Almost, right?
And in terms of union status, you'll find that about, according to the last census, about 37 or so percent of persons are married and living within a union. You'll find that also there is another percentage, what is it, about 23% that is actually in common law union. And then we have the visiting partner relationship, which is less, about 6%. And then about another 37 or so percent that is not in any type of union. Okay. And so it's kind of like the distribution.
So if I am to, and I'm not great at math like this, but it's average 30% and 20%
roughly,
in unions, common law and marriage.
Right, so about 50-something percent.
So about half,
roughly.
The population of the age of marriage are within a union.
When you compare 2010 relative to 2000, you find that there has been a decline in the number of the percentage of persons in marriage. You have also seen an increase in divorce and separation rates, and so you have seen also a decrease in family, I'll say the size of the household. I won't say family, because within a household you could have many families. But in terms of the size of the household, you're seeing a decrease in terms of the average number of persons in that household. We're also seeing decline in fertility rates, so less number of children per women within their reproductive age. So And then we ask ourselves, perhaps, and maybe this segues into the other discussion a little bit, what is driving those demographic changes?
I was just about to ask, what attributes to those specific changes?
Well, let me go back just a little to tell you factually that we do not have a definition for a family in Belize. Something very fundamental. We operate on the basis of some kinds of definition, for example, an extended family, a nuclear family, but a proper definition doesn't exist. It's stated, it's mentioned. What we do know that families are evolving. The standard back in the day, and even now to some respect, is the nuclear family, where you have a man and woman that are married, have children, those kinds of things. That's a very limited view of a family as they exist right now, because the boundaries are being expanded, if we call it. You know, the common law, the visiting relationships, those kinds of things. But yes, we do, for the purposes of breaking families into categories, we operate from some kind of definition.
Let's differentiate those for people who aren't aware. What's the difference between marriage, common law, and visiting?
Well, a marriage is that one where it's registered, it's legally binding, there are certain benefits, certain protections, if we call it, you know. The common law is where people just consensually, by consent, come together.
And live together.
Where none of the parties have been previously married.
Okay, so if one person is still married and cohabitating or living with somebody else, that doesn't,
different. That can be visiting, that can be, I don't
cohabitation.
Cohabitation. Right.
But common law, two non-married people
living together with neither of the partners previously.
Right.
Okay.
And then of course there are protections. If you're living in common law for 5 years, then other provisions kick in as though you're married, for entitlements, benefits, those kinds of things.
What's visiting?
Visiting is where you have one or both parties coming together for short periods of time. Weekends, every, I don't know, 2
People
months.
Who aren't living
not
together.
living together, just come together for specific purposes, and then they just
you maintain your arrangements, I maintain my arrangements,
and those are more common than you think.
The overall, I think I'm looking from things from a broader perspective, in the sense that, John, you went back to 2000 versus some of the trends that we have seen as of 2010. And you're saying that there has been a decline in specific areas, including the actual size of the household, right? Is it to say then that, let's say, most of the younger folks are choosing to have less children, as opposed to, let's say, back in the days when 5, 6 kids were the norm?
Let me grab that one. I think that's one factor really. The other factor is that you have a lot of younger persons deciding to move on their own, so that again change the distribution in terms of the household size. And then you have, for example, like you did say, a lot of the younger, I guess, persons are looking at more towards the shifting and focusing on education, and so that in itself change in terms of how the fertility rates demonstrate. So there's a number of factors in terms of why the change in terms of household size, but then again you find there's, as John mentioned, either common law or marriage, there's a change in that distribution, so you find a lot more persons making very sharp, quick decision to move on their own rather than staying within these arrangements. Let me put it that way.
And maybe just one other factor to contribute there is a deliberate decision to to delay having children. So the number of years within your reproductive cycle now is shorter. So, and then of course you hit those risky age groups for women, and then more women obviously enter in and engage in the labor force. And we know Belize is not the most family-friendly place within which to grow and raise a family and to have employment, especially for women. The private sector and government, there's not much in terms of policies that make it conducive in terms of the length of the maternity leave, in terms of flexi policies in the workplace, in terms of effective daycare services. So when we lack those things, people are forced to make some hard decisions.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like a natural rate of population control, if you want to say.
And there's also more knowledge about sexually reproductive
that's true.
health services, and
Yeah.
so people now know more so how to control or plan their families, and also have access to those services as well.
And then again, when you think about it, it's purpose. Back in the day when people did more farm, children, I mean, were an asset.
Yeah.
You know, to rear whatever.
Are you suggesting that children are no longer an asset?
Well,
Not for farmers.
Not for farming,
right. So we are shifting away from that.
So key indicators you've pointed out so far, we're still looking at half the population who are in a committed relationship, marriage and common law, living together and married.
Right.
We are seeing less people getting married. Is that what you're saying?
That's the trending.
Less children, and also you said higher divorce rates.
Right, relatively.
So that's what we're seeing in terms of our current demographics, based on 2010, the 2010
relative
census,
to 2000.
Relative to 2000. So let's look at some of the factors there and what that means. You know, is there also an increase in visiting relationships?
That has kind of remained a bit constant, but a few percentage points up in there. But marriage is still the preferred cohabitation arrangement, if I could put it that way.
Now, what does this mean in terms of looking at a society? How important is it to have some sort of family structure for the kids growing up, and even, let's not forget, just for the adults who function within our society?
Well, families are a pillar of any society because it naturally creates the environment for procreation, for protection, care. I mean, it's a bedrock of any society. So some kind of functionality and structure, it might come in different form or exist in different form, but it must exist because otherwise then you just fall in decay. So on a personal note, I'm not too worried about the name or the category. So it's what happens in the family can be the magic in the family, where they care, nurture, and create those environments for people to do well. That is way more important to my mind than the name or category. If we want to think of, you know, those kinds of.
Those are constructs.
Right.
The other element that I also see within the family is that family is that unit, that basic unit of production, if you wish. We don't tend to put a lot of emphasis on social production and ensuring that families have the functioning and the capacities to raise their children to become well-adjusted and productive citizens. We put a lot of emphasis on economic production and the means of production, but we don't put in place those necessary support that will help our families to move through the difficulties and challenges that they face. As you know, as we say, families come in all forms, shapes, and sizes, and in recent times we're also seeing different types of families that have reconstituted or blended, as we may call them. We have some families, I heard there was on a show recently talking about same-sex partners and they're rearing children. So you start to see a shift from what was, as you say, in the 60s, where we had maybe the average number of the fertility rate was about 6. Now we're down to maybe 2.8, where we had larger families back in the more agrarian type society and more traditional type families. Now you're seeing a full blossoming of all diversities, if I could say that.
Can I put this forward then? There is a school of thought among certain groups of young people, particularly those who may have grown up in an environment where they have 4, 5, 6 siblings, and there were certain financial hardships that they had to face, because if they were being brought up in a single parent environment, then the mother, more often than not, has to be able to provide and split amongst all 6 of the siblings or her children, right? So that when they grow up, they realize, well, it is arguable that the more kids I have, the more prone I'd be or susceptible I'd be to those very same financial hardships. So you find that that may very well be the determining factor in terms of the way they think and the way they look at parenthood and having kids.
From an economic point of
Yeah.
view? Well, there is a correlation with the poverty statistics and the size of the household and single parent households and so on. They're more predisposed, if I could put it that way. But it's not a cause-effect relationship. We also find that within households there are certain economies of scale that kicks in. So if you buy a chicken and you cook that, the whole family can eat. But you're right, maybe if it's only 2 people, then you could eat 5 times. You know, so there's.
But you know, I am tempted to say, let me say this, that I think there's a greater number of kids in poor families than in wealthier families, right? So it doesn't always add up per se, because of access, resources, education, whatever those reasons, you know. But yeah, you know. But we know little about families.
I was going to say, does the census or does the information we have differentiate between family sizes of people of a higher socioeconomic status versus those on the lower rank?
We'd have to rely on the living standards measurement survey for that.
Yeah, because that would be interesting to see if those who are earning more are having more children or less children versus those who are earning less.
In the 2009 Living Standards and Measurement Survey, there was sort of a confounding element, because it was found that the single parent, quote unquote, households were actually were better off. and nobody could have explained it. We still can't explain. We don't know if it's an issue with the data or it's actually a real statistic.
What's the definition of better off?
Well, in terms of the socioeconomic status, poor, indigent, non-poor, and so on.
So they're being fed, they're going to school.
Right.
But
single parents.
The truth is, though, many times the single parent takes a bad rap. Like some people, anything goes wrong, single parent. You know, and that's not necessarily true. I'm glad Jan points it out. That is not the case.
Let's talk about this, because this is one of the statistics I'd love to really know. We, unfortunately, love generalizations, and we always say, oh, you know, so many people coming from single parent households. What is the real picture? How many families are single parent households versus those who are in a home with a mother and father?
I resort back to the 2010 census, and when we look at the statistics, we're looking roughly at about 23% of children who live with a sole parent. And then we have some 66% or so who live with both, and then you have some children who are what you call parentified child. They're just living on their own, or they're orphans and so on.
So 20 versus 60 on average.
Like 3 to 1 roughly.
So for every one child who's coming from a single parent household, there are 3 more who are living with
both parents.
Both parents.
And those parents could be step parents, or they could be biological parents as well. As we say, families reconstitute often, no?
So when you think of what the modern family is within Belize, and I appreciate that you pointed out that more women are in the labor force, which really changes the dynamics of families itself. You know, where, and I don't know the numbers, but where we heard of parents who used to stay home, or moms who used to stay home and take care of the kids, it's not as common today. Now, what does that mean for the family structure?
Well, when we think about a modern family, well, 50 years ago, that was the modern family. But families face challenges to make ends meet, you know, the economic stuff. We have a very mobile society. We have institutional constraints. For example, for the sake of a job, you have to be relocated, you know, those kinds of things. So families have to adjust. And just traditionally, families have been adjusting. So the modern family has to contend with the social challenges of today: mobility, health situations, economic situations. All those things impact on the family greatly. So you have extended people coming in. You know, even in Belize here, children after school, they'll probably be with a grandparent until that parent is free and pick up that child. So that grandparent is crucial to the overall welfare of that child. So the modern family struggles with many things, but you know, historically they do come around, and of course there's an impact. And I think Jan kind of mentioned that, you know, what is the focus? People have less time to be parenting, or parenting is those few hours after work, after 5 or whatever, and then you get ready to do the whole thing again. So we have those institutions that are really raising our children, the schools as an example, you know, the television as an example. So those are the challenges today.
Yeah, I think just to add here in terms of when you look at the global situation then and the global situation now, really you're looking at each family trying to compete against families within, from a national perspective, and then competing globally against all other families. And when you see everybody within that family has to contribute, and so you find parents, children, everybody trying to figure out ways in terms of you know, from an economic standpoint, how do I contribute? If in terms of looking and trying to see what's the best available education, how I can contribute even as a child to that. And so you find that each person within the household, so you know, parents, mothers looking for jobs, trying to add there, as Fermin said, in terms of the mobilization of families having to take hard decisions, having to move their family or leave their family. And I think it goes back to the Mother's Day show, I believe, that you guys had. One of the parents spoke about the fact that, you know, parenting does not come with a manual, right? And so you find that each and every person within the family have to try to provide and be that support system for that child, right? And so whatever it takes really is kind of the mentality as to why the shifting change is happening now.
There has been a considerable shift in the dynamics, if I may, where at one point you found that more and more men were the breadwinners, and that was sort of established in our society as such. To now where you see that more women are being educated, more women are accessing education and are now becoming fruitful within the workforce, so to speak. And you find that less boys are going to school, less men are actually working or at the tertiary level. So there has been that kind of, I wouldn't say a role reversal per se, but there has been a shift in the way how things work.
I'm glad
but does the labor force reflect that?
It does. Well, actually, in terms of the economically active persons, we have about 49% of women in the labor force, in terms of female in the labor force. Now, in terms of how many of them are employed, it's a lesser number. But I'm glad you raised the issue of, I would say, the gender role, because indeed the changing dynamics have also placed a natural pressure on the functioning of the family. And I always say it is what works for your family. You need to reorganize yourselves. And so if that family is that fundamental unit of production, then as a man, a woman, as children in the family, you guys have to figure out how you will make it work. Because as you said, it's no longer just that the male is the breadwinner, but the female maybe can earn more because they have higher levels of education, they may be able to gain employment much faster in some areas. The man might be into seasonal employment. So, you know, you have to look at those dynamics, and so it is what will work for that family.
So from a broader picture then, would we say that we are living now in a more matriarchal society, or we're trending towards being in a matriarchal society?
As you said, I don't think we have a complete reversal of the roles, but certainly we're shifting. The dynamics is shifting, and we're moving in that direction, I think.
You know, and maybe some contributing factors is just the idea of women's liberalization, and part of their own independence, finding their own, you know, those traditional roles. It's a response to economic times. Even good men, one salary is not enough. The cost of living.
I was going to touch on that. Is it more just responding to the needs of the family? In other words, you have smaller families and you also work as a woman within the household to contribute towards the better living standards for the children. So not so much, I don't know if it would be considered, and it's hard, you could tell me what the data says, Because I still find it hard to believe. We always hear from the Women's Commission, for example, about women who aren't able to get employment and about how women in the workforce are still not making what men make. So we have more women working, but still not to the same standard. But that's a different conversation too.
I don't have the data on the equal pay for equal work and so on. But I would imagine, given the pay scales that we operate on, there is no overt discrimination per se, because you get paid based on qualifications,
public service,
and so on. Right. There may be some professions where you might have a male engineer earning more than a female engineer. That could be due to experience, that could be due to whatever.
Any number of factors.
Right.
But then going back to the role of women, I think what we see is that, and this is just for discussion, is obviously that as society has changed, women have changed their roles and men have changed their roles as well. Because we see many more men who are very involved in their family, and that's a change from what was before, where they were simply disciplinarian, and I only know this anecdotally, for provider, right? So the roles have shifted, that women are getting involved with the work, and men are also getting more involved with the families.
As you say, families to a large extent is a common sense approach, Just have to pay attention, as you say, and driven by the needs and what is it that you require to function as a family. And some things you are just better placed as a male because of maybe your timing, because of your job flexibility to do. Simple things like, as you say, dropping off the child to the daycare or to the preschool and so on, Nothing is wrong with that. But traditionally you would see, if I was a hunter or a farmer, I don't have time to do that. So sometimes we may misconstrue a particular function within the family as a perhaps gender attribute, but maybe it's just the way we're organized.
Let me bring that right to you guys, because you're all fathers, and there is often, and I go back to the generalization that we speak of, a generalization about the lack of involvement of fathers. What do you find in your own lives, in your own social circles, and how do you respond to that particular generalization?
From a personal perspective, Marilene, I cannot associate. I don't have a choice. My daughters and my wife, I'm forced to participate in the lives of my children.
You love participating in the life of your children. I've seen you with your kids.
I can't see how any sensible father would not want to have a relationship with their children and to be a part of that. There are circumstances sometimes between adults that get complicated, that sometimes causes those issues. But I say to these men, still try and work out those issues so that you can have a relationship with your child. I think oftentimes, as you pointed out earlier, we assume that the whole is like the part. And so we take the one or two outliers, as we call them in statistics, and we generalize. But I still feel that there are a number of men, there are a number of women, there are a number of families out here who are doing the best they can by their children. And I honestly believe that. I don't have the statistics to look at that qualitatively or otherwise, but from what I observe, yes, we have a number of men who have disengaged, who as a result of that conflict with their partner have decided not to remain engaged with their families and their children. That's a sad case.
Terrible.
And I think that's a loss to them and definitely a loss to the children. But fortunately for the children, sometimes there is another person in the family who can play that role. An uncle or a cousin or a grandfather, or somebody who plays that kind of father figure, and so the child has like a surrogate, if you wish. Unfortunately for the man, he has lost out from that relationship with their children. Well, that's just my perspective.
No, that is great. Actually, my baby girl, my baby daughter is well over 20 years. Let me put it that way. And actually, I agree with Jana 100%. I wish I could have in my personal life spent more time. That's a given. But what did I learn? Grandchildren are coming into the picture, then that becomes another focus, another opportunity to be involved. I think it is a great, that's one of the changes I would love to see, that men become more involved as nurturers, caretakers. They can just win. Everybody will just win. And then of course, it makes for a good response, a family response for the welfare of that family.
Let's get Dylan before we...
I think just to say that when I think about it and knowing, you know, becoming a father, you realize that there's no other thing to do but take up that responsibility and try as much as possible, in any way possible, to be involved. Yes, you have the job responsibilities and everything that sometimes take you away from it, but spending half an hour is better than spending no time. And just
quality time.
Quality time, no? Just to quickly add, we spoke of the origins of how some of these families started, right? And then you realize some of these are not planned, right? And so you end up with different situations of people trying to then figure out how they will adapt and make it work. But at the end of the day, I say, it's not about you, it's not about us. Whatever happened. The child is there. Now let's focus on making that child into the best possible person, right? And that is parenting, and that is being a responsible family, that is being a responsible father, you know, so and that is how I put it.
Maybe dispel the myth a little bit about children who grow up in single parents families may tend to perpetuate, or males, and I can say I know a lot of males who come from single parent households who have actually turned sort of a negative experience into a positive one.
It's even more important.
Exactly, and they have consciously made the decision not to go down that road, because particularly they have lived that arrangement, they know the difficulties, and they don't want that for their families.
And that's what I think we want to talk about next, but we do have to take a break very quickly, and when we come back we'll be talking about the individual roles, the importance of the individual roles within families. So that's coming up in a few, so stay tuned.
Looking for low-cost television advertising? Have we got a deal for you? Advertise on Channel 5's Daily Classifieds. Channel 5's Daily Classifieds is one of the most effective methods for introducing yourself and your business to the community. Use our Daily Classifieds to recruit employees, promote specials, promote your products or services, promote a business opportunity, increase traffic to your website, and advertise items you have for sale. Let us help you save valuable time and money. Call us today at 223-0146 or visit us at our offices on Pony Drive to discuss how we can help your business grow affordably. Channel 5's Daily Classifieds. Advertise today.
Welcome back, and we are continuing our conversation about the modern family in Belize. And gentlemen, it's been very informative so far, and now we're going to talk about some of the social aspects of the family. We talked the numbers and statistics, but now we got to talk about the importance of the family. One of the common things we say is that the family is the foundation of any society. It's where children are raised, where they learn their values and their beliefs. And we were speaking about the role of fathers as well. Let's talk about why the way a family is managed and the way children grow up within a family, why it's so important in terms of the development of a country.
Let me say this. There is a little book. I can't remember the author's name, but the name of the book is King, Warrior, Lover, Magician. And it really speaks about the archetype of men. Men in their household, that a man needs to know when to be, he needs to be the king, he needs to be a warrior, a magician as well. Those are things that he needs to know.
Don't forget the lover part.
The lover, the king, warrior, lover, right. But there's a role. Now we have focus on one, maybe two, but not that holistic. And a man has, in many respects, lost his way from that real merit of him being there. You cannot only be the warrior or you know, that protector. Not only that, it goes beyond that. You have to be a lover to every member of that family. You know, so that was a great little book that I think spoke. You know, it speaks to the many roles that we can play and we need to play.
And we know more and more with studies that come out that children, male and female, need the role of a father in their lives. They're better equipped Not that they won't be able to function very clearly, but they're better equipped if they have the role of a father in their life.
Right.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right, Marlene, because at the end of the day, even in the absence of a father or a mother in the household, you say we do function, but sometimes our function is a level of dysfunction, if I could put it in those terms. And the presence of fathers in the lives, I'll speak in the lives of their girl children, for example, is so critical, because young girls will tend to seek out destructively that relationship that didn't exist in the home. And we see that too often playing out in our society. And that is something we need to address urgently. When you look at the teenage pregnancy rates, you look at the early sexual encounters and so on. You know, these are things that with stronger foundations, with the presence, as you said, of men in the households, you know, that need to be more pronounced, and not just physically present, but present, but as Fermin said, you know, actively present, nurturing, loving, and caring. You know, those are things that are non-negotiable, if I could put it that way.
And if not a father figure.
At least, exactly. And we could say father in quotes, no?
Yeah.
Definitely. But certainly we know that children belong with their biological parents. That's where they need to grow up and raise. But when that fails, then we have to find suitable substitutes, if I can put it in those terms. And you asked about the roles and functions, and I say, well, generally, as I spoke about the social production function of families, and families as a basic unit of society, we have two main obligations as a family. We have an obligation to our family members, and then as a family, we have an obligation to our nation. And so if we do right by our families individually, then we're contributing to a stronger democratic nation, we're contributing to a stronger labor force, an educated labor force, a healthy labor force, because we're having young people and children who are connected to their families, connected to education, connected to employment. That's really what we want. We want, at the end of the day, the human resource base that will propel us. Because we tend to put economic production in front of social production, and then we end up searching for the human resource base that we need to propel, and then we can't find it. It takes us 20, 30 years to produce an individual with the competencies to effectively engage the labor market. And then imagine we didn't put in place those foundations, and then we need to find that labor force. Where will we get it from? You know, so these are some of the importance of social production.
It's a matter of putting the cart before the horse, in a sense.
Precisely.
Let's just go back to roles as well and include mothers. The role of, you know, I think for me personally, it's just hard to imagine families or children growing up without a mother, but there are cases that it does take place. How important is the maternal role?
I think, just coming from a single parent household, raised up by mother, and I take it from a personal angle in this point. It's really important. Just the mothers are always considered to be one of the main caregivers, and so that love, that nurturing. But as John said, you don't necessarily want to lock it into any one function. But it's significant. Growing up with my mother, who became also tried to provide some further role, but I mean that just doing that, it's significant for me, because that guidance along the way, you know, was significant. But also, as you spoke of the father figure, you need that person, whether it's a male, any male within the family or outside of the family, to do that. Because as much as your mother can try, you know, to provide you with everything she possibly can, whilst working and doing everything else, you still need that support. So it's
the reason I bring that up is that we have heard very often where there is a call on communities for men, for example, to step in when they know that children are not provided with a father figure. And it doesn't mean that you're going to go and date the mom. If you are in church and to mentor and provide that role, that male role, which is necessary for children growing up. And we have heard more and more about how communities try to get involved on that level. Is that a sufficient supplement?
Can I say? It depends at which level. For example, it will be difficult for any man to be closely involved, say, for example, a little girl that's 4 years old that's growing without a dad.
Yeah.
And we're talking about it could be an uncle or whatever. It is, there's just restriction there. There, you know, there are concerns there. But institutionally, there can be those opportunities through maybe sports and recreation activities that happen in the community that can bring either men together to do common things, or boys and girls, or combine. Those are, I think, opportunities that we need more of.
Right, the scouting, the Girl Guides, those kinds of opportunities where you could engage, no?
Okay.
When you look around, when you look around in your respective neighborhoods, you find that to an extent there are those children who are growing up in a family that has both parents, and then you also have somewhere it's only the father or it's only the mother. Then when you look at the fact that these children vary in age, you find that the ones that are most vulnerable are the ones who are like 9 to 13. They're on the verge of adolescence, so to speak. In my community where I live, I find that is often the case. As I walk out of my house, I find a bunch of young boys who don't have that direction. So the mother is there, the mother tries her best to be able to provide, but there are certain lessons, there are certain aspects of guidance that a mother simply cannot do for her son. And you find that because of that absence, they tend to gravitate towards each other. But they themselves don't know enough about life, so they end up going down the wrong path, despite the fact that they are looking for that sense of love or acquaintanceship.
Well, the sense of belonging is innate. You know, we're born with that. We want to it's better to belong, even if it's something bad, but not to belong any at all. And you know, we need to be, in all fairness, you know, many times we think, and people do make choices. But lots of things within the family and community context just really happen, you know. First of all, we don't choose our families. We're just born in a family. And that family is placed in a community, in a context of time. So many times you hear people, oh, they're recruiting this person. No recruitment. Maybe some, but very minimal. It's a natural progression. Kids born in these communities and belong to these cultures or subcultures. Powerful influence. In the absence then of other more positive opportunities, then that is your viable opportunity. Let me just throw a little thing here. We think about schools and stuff. If we think about Leo Messi as an example. Leo Messi doesn't have a degree. He went very early to a football school. And look at what happened. So it's that natural. If you are putting opportunities for good or for bad, that is how the development will happen. So,
and if there's no good available, then there's only the bad.
Then that is what will happen.
This brings me to a key point as we're getting towards the end of the conversation. I don't want to miss the opportunity. While we speak of the modern family, and we really clarified what the statistics are showing, but we know, given the social issues that this country is facing, some things not working or not being done or not being done right. Let's talk about the threats to our families that perhaps if people here this morning, they know they can perhaps focus on being able to better improve within their own households so that we can see the changes that we are hoping to have within Belize. So who wants to start with that?
Let me just hurry quick and say my 2 cents, because these gentlemen, you know. But let me say this: families thrive within an environment, not in isolation. And let me be the first to. I really don't care what is said. I would look at figures, data, indication to the best of my, and that will inform me as to the state and health of our country. While I think maybe we have made some little gains in some areas, I think much more needs to be done. Wherever those resources are going, don't seem to be helping us reach where we want to go. I don't want to be cynical about this, but I would want to see better. I would want to see more opportunities for the Belizean family to thrive and do well. I like to think this. Yes, we care for poor people, but we don't need to love them so much that we make it a purpose to have more poor people in Belize, more impoverished families. We love them, we care for them. Let us reduce the numbers. So that is an objective view of when I think about this, and I'm not being cynical or anything, but I think we can do better.
Yeah.
And we need to take a sober look. And to take stock about the Belizean family deserves better.
Yeah.
And maybe to add to that a little bit, and coming back to the questions that both of you asked, in terms of the importance of the roles of either and both parents, and then within the various communities, how we look at the risk factors, if you wish, that contribute to strong families or to risk to children growing up, particularly the middle childhood. You find that that's an age grouping where we just tend to take our hands off. So we put a lot of attention on the young child.
Yeah.
We kind of give them a lot of leverage during the middle childhood, and we pick them up in adolescence period again when we say they're acting out, you know. And so the issue really is ensuring that there is structure, there is safe boundaries, because whether it's a mom or a dad or a figure in the family, we need to be constant in our approaches. Otherwise, we confuse the children. We're saying we're approving, and next minute we're disapproving. And I think sometimes as adults, we do that a lot. I see that a lot sometimes with parents. So as we look at trying to ensure that parents perhaps do by their children better, is to be constant, to be consistent with the way they discipline, not the punishment issues, but the discipline, to set safe boundaries, to be positive in the way they work with their children. I think that says a lot about us as humans and about the way we treat our children. It also puts in place solid foundation, an early start, a good start. Because without that solid foundation in what we call the early years, the 0 to 8, the rest will be very rocky. Sometimes even with a solid foundation, you have a rocky later years, but at least you have a solid foundation. So good health, good education, positive parenting, I think those are the things we want to focus on as parents, to ensure children are healthy, they're active, they're in school, they're engaged in their environments, contributing, volunteering and so on, because that also raises their self-esteem and their self-confidence, so that when they become adolescents, they're better placed to deal with those tremendous issues that they face. So as parents, that's what we can offer to them, and so to enhance the protective factors as well, no?
Yeah, and I think just to add to what John is saying in terms of, as I made mention earlier, a lot of parents really, you're walking into this thing blind, right? And so how is it that as institutions, as persons responsible to assist parents, we figure out ways of supporting parents to be parents, right? And I think that is critical, because just understanding the development phases of children is something as professionals you're still trying to understand, right? And so how is it that we expect parents to do better when they themselves don't understand? Key, as John made mention of the early years, understanding those pieces, understanding that there are certain things linked to prenatals, linked to bonding and all of these different things. That's critical at the early ages. Additionally, understanding the transitions from childhood to adolescent and what happens there, right? And I think that is critical, that we figure out ways of coming together. And I think from the NCFC side, we're trying to do that, but how is it that we up the ante and make it work? Because as we're going to the different municipalities and the different districts, that is what people are calling for. How is it that we support them to be parents? And so I think moving forward, that's the direction.
Time for a parenting education course within school systems? Never know. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was a very interesting conversation, taking a look at the modern family in Belize. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're going to go ahead now and take a break. And when we come back, we'll be talking about promoting agribusiness in northern Belize. That's coming up after the break. Stay tuned.